guess I'll need to look at the fretboard and see how that looks and see what we can do to maybe clean that up. Regarding the fretboard, it does have the little bitty tiny frets in it. I mean, these are every bit as small as mandolin frets and maybe smaller. There are some fairly deep grooves in here, up to about there, a little bit here, so about to the 5th fret. And I'm just, well, let's look down it. I haven't looked down it yet. Well, there's a fairly significant underbow in this. And of course, there's no truss rod that I can see or anywhere to get to one. So there doesn't appear to be any kind of a truss rod at all. I didn't figure there would be, and I didn't expect one at this end, but I just thought I'd check just to be sure. So there's a pretty big underbow in this, so we can't really fix that without taking it apart, you know, taking the fretboard off of it, and I don't think the customer wants to go that far. I think I'm going to call that good. It's got still a little tiny bit of groove in this very first fret. Yeah, you could replace it, but if you replaced it, it would be so tall you'd have to file it way down anyway. So I'm going to call that good enough. I think that'll satisfy this customer. I believe it will. And I think it's the, I mean, if it was mine, that's what I would do. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. But sometimes what I would do and what others want is two different things. Okay, so now I got to put in the tiny fret crown here. We'll recrown all these frets and clean up the whole fretboard. I'm not going to bother filming all that because I've done it a million times on camera. So we're going to clean it up and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. I've got the fretboard looking real good. You can see there, I think. It's still got a few little deep fingernail grooves in it there, but you know, that's just part of it. It's old. Next, he wants to put on a pickguard. Now the problem with putting on the pickguard, I went and Googled as much as I could on this L3, and you know, the pickguard really is pretty similar shaped, at least the ones that I see on there, but this one is very thick. I don't think this was meant for this guitar at all. It's hugely thick. I mean, it's a full 1/8 inch thick at least. Starting with that, let's just say that. And then this here was this piece that connects onto this pickguard. This connects up under here like that. This was really, really thick also, and I've been spending some time sanding it down to the contour of the top here so that this bracket will fit flush on the side over here, because it wouldn't fit flush before. This was standing up so tall, and I'm exaggerating obviously, but it was standing up kind of like this, and then this was, the bottom of this was hitting, but it wasn't hitting on the face. So I've got it hitting on the face pretty good. You know, it's about right. It's about as close as I think I'm going to get it. Then I also was noticing that the point of this goes to around the 4th fret. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it goes to about there somewhere, which also gives us, looks like it gives us about the right amount of room for the where the bridge goes here. You can see the old scratch marks there. So I'm just trying to make it work, but it's, you know, we're retrofitting something that doesn't really belong on here, and that's part of the issue. Because this is so thick, this is making it stand up a lot higher. Also, because it's so thick, it doesn't give me much room underneath it to put the pins in here. Usually there's 1 or 2 pins that go into the side of the neck. Because it's so far up on the neck, I think it probably needs 2 pins. It's just not simple. And the problem with that is, how do I get 2 pins embedded in this? And I may have to route 2 little slots and then cover it with glue and plastic to melt it in there, so to speak. And then, you know, I might even have to route out a square where this goes to drop it down some, because it's just so thick. Now, I mean, the only other thing I could do would be to run this through my thickness sander, and I think it would work to cut it down, but because I think it does need to be thinned down. I think it's just a hair too thick. It's way thicker than any one for these old guitars that I've ever seen. In fact, I'd say it's almost twice as thick as the norm. Just wanting to make it look reasonably authentic. I don't think it's going to look real authentic with this real thick guard on here though. This pick guard is so thick, I hate to put it on the guitar that way. I just don't think it looks right. So I'm going to try to thin it down a little bit. I'm not going to try to get it all the way down to the standard thickness, which would be pretty darn thin actually. I'm just going to try to knock 20 or 30 thousandths off of it and see where we're at. Right now we're at 171 thousandths it looks like. No, I'm sorry, I read that backwards. 160, about 168 thousandths, something like that, 167. So roughly 160 some thousandths. Let's just see if we can get it down to, oh, I don't know, maybe 120 thousandths, something like that. So here we go. I'm taking it off of the top mostly because this round over bevel is just too big and I want to get rid of some of that bevel. I'm going to have to buff this back out. Might not be easy. I may have made a big mistake there. I don't know. It's hard to tell what shows up in this particular monitor, but that should show up that we're just 2 thousandths over 120 thousandths. For my millimeter friends, we took about 1.25 millimeters off of this, about 50 thousandths off of it roughly. So we're left with 120 thousandths. If you divided that by 40, that's what, about 3 millimeters. So it's about 3 millimeters thick still, which is still plenty heavy. It's more than normal, but it looks better now. It doesn't have all that great big curl down this long edge. It has a bevel now, which is more the normal look. It has a little bit of a bevel versus a great big round over. We've got the pickguard thinned down. I have some 320 here, and I'm just going to go over it a little bit to see if that's going to be good enough to smooth it out, or do I need to go to something else. My thickness sander does a pretty good smooth job, but on plastic it's still pretty rough. So here's my problem with sanding blocks. Every time I do it, I get these big things like that, and then they leave marks in whatever you're sanding. If anybody knows a way around that, let me know, because that's the main reason I don't use sanding blocks. I really hate that. It bugs the tar out of me. I've gotten so used to doing it by hand, and I really feel I do a very good job by hand, and I also feel like I do a faster job by hand. So there you go. You just don't get near the buildup. I can use the same piece here in the middle, and I'm not getting the buildup. And 320 might be good enough here. I might have to go to some 220 first to knock off these bigger marks. Then go to 320, then to 400, then probably 600, and then buff it. But this thing definitely needed to be thinned down in my opinion. And in my opinion, it's still too thick, but this is a lot better than it was. I have a whole lot of that to do, and it's boring for you to watch, so I'm just going to get that done and bring you back when we get her pretty close to finished. Even with my fingers, you can see the 400 wet or dry just builds up immediately on this plastic. So I'm going to go to wet sanding with 400 and see if I can do any better with that. Got my 400 wet or dry with some water and dish soap. That helps keep the buildup from happening. Apparently the soap does. Doesn't seem to be building up now. It was just building up instantly before. All right, I don't know that I'm ready for 600 yet, but I'm going to go to 600 and see what that does with the wet or dry here. First thing I always do is try to get the sandpaper pretty good and wet, soak it up a little bit. It seems to work a little bit better. Well, that's looking pretty good already. There's still a few marks around the edges that you might be able to see in the camera there, around here and a little bit around that. But it's starting to look pretty darn good. So I think if we just spend a little more quality time with the 600 here, might have to go back to the 400 to get rid of these edge problems. I'm just trying to decide where to put the little nails that'll go into this. I've got the pickguard, first of all, about where it ought to be according to other pictures I've seen, and it looks like it just gives room for the feet here of the bridge. I am laying this ruler here just more of a eyeball thing because I don't really want to mark the top of this. So to me, if I drill, or if I make one at 1 inch and 2 inches and put pins in those two locations, I think we'll be in good shape. I could even go a 1/2 inch and 2 inches, and that might be better because it'd spread it out a little bit more. And maybe that's what I'll do, because that gives me about a 1/2 inch to the end of the fretboard, and gives me about a 1/2 inch to the end of the pickguard there. So I think that's what I'll do. I'll go a 1/2 inch and 2 inches and mount nails on this. It'll probably be a little bit tricky on how I'm going to do this. I'll take a magic marker and I'll just randomly mark about a 1/2 inch and about 2 inches. And hopefully those marks will stay there where I can see them. That just gives me a ballpark. And what I'm really going to do is I'm going to come in like this and make a small L. Come in like this and make a small L. That'll keep them from pulling out. I'm going to make little trenches here and lay the nails in there, in the trenches. First thing I'm going to do is get me some nails, get them bent properly, and lay them on here and see what we got. Well, perhaps you can see I've got 2 nails here, and I've bent them. I left the points on them. They could be cut off if I don't need them. It's not that big a deal right now. I have the shanks laying where the black magic marker is. I don't want a whole lot sticking out. Roughly a 1/4 inch is about all that generally ever goes into the fretboard, if that. So what I'm doing here is I'm opposing these two, and my goal is to put a piece of plastic on top of this and to laminate it between plastic. I want to route a groove so that these go down in the plastic approximately, well, just deep enough to bury the nail is really about what it amounts to. I'd like to go deeper. If I hadn't thinned it, I could have, but it's 6 of one, half dozen in the other. You never know which way you're wanting everything to go. I'd kind of like to go route it a little deeper so that I could inlay the plastic flush to the bottom of this, but realistically that's probably not going to happen. We'll just have to take it a step by step and see how it's going to turn out here, and I'm not 100% sure yet myself. I think I'm going to start by just trying to hold this in place by hand, scratching how this is going to be on the pickguard here. This will be where I want to route out the little slot on this one. And that should work. I don't know how well that's showing up there, but hopefully the camera will focus when you have it zoomed in. There it goes. But you can kind of see there, that's what I'm going to route out. I got a little scrap piece of maple here. I don't have a lot of scrap plastic, so it's just easier to use a piece of wood for a test. This is not the best piece for a test either, because it's not a square piece of wood, it's a wedge actually, but I think it'll work. I just want to practice routing this little slot, check to see how deep I have this set. So here we go. Now the idea is just to see, does one of these bent nails fit down in there? And close. I routed it out a little bit bigger this time just to make sure it would fit, because I'm really checking depth. It's on the edge of being right, but it's not quite deep enough. It could go just a hair deeper. I've got room, because if I go too deep, then I've got a mess, got a problem. Okay, the thickness of these nails is 71 and a half thousandths. The thickness of this is about 120 or so. 123 it's saying here. So we should have plenty of room. I should be able to go deeper. .71 thousandths. I think we're right there. I'm just doing all kinds of sanity checks here because I don't want to go through this plastic. I don't think we'll go through it there. All right, holding this and doing all this is not the easiest. I don't have a lot of room to hold it. I could put a little clamp on it right here, wouldn't hurt nothing to keep it from moving on me while I'm working on it. Yeah, I don't know how stuff can happen like it does, but like that's, it's trying to go deeper than it was. I don't know what's causing that. It's just something. I cut a shallow groove there. I'm trying to cut it all at once, or not all at once. I cut a shallow path through there first, and then the second pass I was trying to go full depth, but that's not working. I'm going to have to cut another shallow path because the plastic's melting to the bit here and then causing a bigger tear out. Bummer. Okay. Well, despite the little trauma that I went through there, I think it's fine. Yeah, it's just about perfect, really. Now I just want to take it out of my little clamp here and see what it looks like on the other side. Did it cause any trauma there? No, I don't see any trauma on the other side, so we're looking real good. That's about as good as it's going to get. Well, that seemed to work pretty good. We got the slots cut. Now I'm looking at it here, and that'd probably be okay. The only thing that's bothered me is that there's kind of a bevel on this thing. I'm tempted to at least knock the bevel off for the length of how it's attached to the fretboard here. Just barely knock it off. So I could go, down almost 2.5 inches, I think. Need to measure that. Yeah, I could go down 2.5 inches, no problem. All right, there's my 2.5 inch mark. I'll just start right there, and I'm just gonna cut this off flat. Rather than have it squared off here, I'll just take and use a round file where it comes together there. I'll just round it off just to give it a little bit of a shape. And I'll take this file's a little less coarse, and I think I'll just smooth it off a little bit more with that. And I'm just checking it for, it looks good and flat and straight, I think. Actually, there's a little bit of a hump right there. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Well, let's see what that did. There's hardly any difference there but it gives it a flat edge to go up against the fretboard, and it also gives a little more thickness there where these nails are coming out. You know, because before this was beveled down and you could see the slots coming out the sides. So I think that's going to work better. Now I'm ready to go ahead and embed these nails. Okay, I just went through my scrap drawers and I found this old pickguard that's very similar color. It's not exactly the same kind of pattern, but I figure it'll work for our purposes. It's a little thin. It's really thin, actually. But I think I can make it work here. I'm going to just kind of pick a spot there, overlay it like so, turn it over, and then trace this shape right here. All right, and then I'll cut that out. Let's see if I can see it. It's really hard to see. The idea is that that will be underneath there, glued to this, sandwiching the nails in, and the nails will be glued too, of course. So now I just need to clean off this back edge, and we'll do that with the old trusty single edge razor blade. You can smell it. It's the old nitrocellulose plastic, and that's what I wanted. I don't know if this new stuff is I doubt, well, the new stuff is not, because I know I didn't smell that when we were sanding and grinding. This here has a totally different smell. This stuff melts with acetone really easy. All right, so we got her cleaned off real good. I don't know. This, I'm not 100% sure how to go about this. I think I'll use the acetate glue that I have. Beacon 527, it's great on the old plastics. It melts them together. Probably not so much on this new plastic. I don't know. It does melt the new plastics to some degree, but not like it did with the old plastics. Very good glue for the old plastics. Very good. So I know this old plastic is going to stick to it really good. The new plastic, you know, it's just, we'll see what happens. That's all I can tell you. So now I would like to sandwich this between something and clamp it. And you know what? I've got something right here. And we're just going to put it in here and let her sit. The only problem with this is I can't see if it moves. I doubt it will, though. I'm going to unclamp it and just make sure it didn't move on me. Get rid of the squeeze out here. Seems like it's fine. I'm going to put it back in there. I'm happy with that if it'll stay right there. Hope it stays. We'll just call that good. We'll let that sit for quite a while, several hours, because I just don't want to take a chance of that coming loose. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a real solid hold. I let this sit in the vise for, an hour and a half or so last night, and, you know, clamped up, or yesterday afternoon. And it seemed to be fine. I took it out and I just let it sit here on the bench overnight. And overnight you can see how it shows the indentation of the wires that are in there, the nails that are in there, and on the back side. Now on the top side, believe it or not, they're a lot further from the surface. I don't know why it melted through that far, but that does indicate that we got good adhesion because of that melting. I'm going to see now if I can level that off. Unfortunately, that means I'm going to have to rebuff this, but I didn't expect it on this side at all. I'm going to use the flat thing here because I'm trying to get rid of the humps, and I want it to be as level as possible, although I think I could do it with my fingers probably just as well. But yeah, that actually looks pretty good already. So maybe we'll dry it off and see if we still see it. No, I don't even really see it now. Oh, maybe a little bit. Maybe just a tiny, tiny bit. Now I'll get some 600 and go on down and see what we can do here. Here's a little bit of 600. This water's pretty hot, so it softens up the paper pretty fast. There's still a few little tiny scratches right here on this outer end. I'm just going to hit them with the 600 again. Maybe we'll get rid of them too, hopefully. Yeah, I like it even better than before. I think we can just buff it out now with the semi-chrome and call that thing finished. We might have the same issue again when we stick that other little piece on here down here later. Hope not, but we might. I doubt it though, because it's got to go the full thickness on that. This only had to go half thickness. Okay, well, here we go. Let's try the semi-chrome and see if we can polish this baby out. That's probably good enough. It doesn't have to be a super high gloss. It just has to look nice on an old instrument. Yeah, I think it would look fake if it was a real high gloss anyway. So I think this is a good kind of a semi-gloss look. Really actually pretty nice. Very nice look, I think. I think that's just about perfect. You know, try to get it any smoother than that, I think would just be counterproductive. So, I think we're going to call that good, and now we're going to see if we can start mounting this thing on the guitar. I will say those are very solid. I don't think those are coming out of there. They're in pretty good shape. I think I might have them a little long. I'm not exactly sure just how long I want them, but I'm probably going to cut the tips of those off. But not until I use them to mark it with, because those tips are sharp and I think they'll give me a good marking point. I have this simulated as to where it goes. I'm just got it there just to kind of be under there to hold it up. I want to keep this as low as I can keep it, but on the other hand, I don't want it so low that I can't get it in there either. I'm going to try to go ahead and mark this right here just by squeezing it on that plastic with those points. I think I've got it right where I want it. To help me with that just a little bit, I'm going to try to mark it with a black magic marker right above each point, just so I can find the points. Alright, now I'm going to go to the Dremel tool with a long bit to try to drill those in there without scratching the top of this. That's another trick. Ordinarily, to drill these little holes in the sides here, I would use my flexible shaft deal here. This is made by Grizzly. This is not a Fordham, which is, I think, the high dollar one, or the name brand one or whatever. This one here has a fairly large barrel. I had one from Sears that had a small barrel, but it wore out. The small barrel would be very preferable for this because we're in very tight area. However, I think I could make this one work were it not for one thing, and that is I've lost the chuck key. I'm usually very good about keeping all that stuff together, but in this case, something happened. I had it dedicated in my metal shop there for a while doing some things, and it's gone. I just can't find it. I've looked everywhere. I know I'll run across it one of these days and go, oh, there it is. But right now, this does me absolutely no good. Well, it's been a tough struggle here. I couldn't find the right bit. None of the standard bits out of the packages would fit. I had to go to my machinist bits. They're measured in thousandths, and found one that's maybe a couple thousandths smaller. I'm still struggling with this because I'm getting in at a little bit of an angle down. I'm exaggerating, but I'm kind of going like that when I want to be going perfectly flat. And that's about the best I'm going to do. It did a nice job on the holes. I have a feeling they're going to be angled a little bit. I'm probably going to have to bend these pins to make it work. And that's assuming the pins will fit the holes. And they sort of do. Not too bad, actually. I'm pretty happy with that, believe it or not. It's kind of surprised that it went in there. It's not really tilted up too much, but I will have to probably bend these pins just a hair if I can get them to bend without causing any real problem here. I'm gonna, yeah, that worked. They bend okay. I can hold on to them, and yeah, that worked. I think that's going to work okay. Don't need much of a bend. And I think I want to cut them off a little bit. I want to cut off, oh, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. Get rid of the real sharp point. And I may have to take a file and round off those edges so they don't catch. It's getting in there, but it's not in there all the way. It's sticking out. The holes may just be too small. Not really sure about that yet. Just about there. I think we could go with that. That's not too bad, really. And then let's see if this will fit under here. Get that glued on. I think we're in pretty good shape. One thing that is different is this is a screw-through mount, and this has never had that type of mount on it. It had the clamp-on type mount before. On the other hand, I think this is probably be the best way to put it on there, because those other kind are a pain in the neck, plus they're hard to come by. I'm just trying to find the right spot for it, where it seems to match up the best. What I'm seeing is that this back heel is kind of catching. I'd like to file off all the sharp corners too. Okay, that knocks off all the corners there. And then this back edge was a little bit touchy. Knock it down just a little bit. I like the way that looks there. That's pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and mount the screw into this first and then glue this down, and then we know we're in the right place. Alright, I've already got it marked here where I want to drill the hole, so I've got a little tiny drill bit and I've got a nice little screw that should fit perfect. Pretty much as always, when I go in, put a new screw into an instrument, I almost always wax it. It makes it go in a lot easier and not give you too much trouble. And the main thing about something like that is you just turn it till it stops. You don't try to tighten it, you just turn it till it stops. And it stopped right there, and that's where we're going to leave it. Now we need to get the glue on there and get her pressed in place and let it set for 24 hours, and I think we're in good shape. I've got my glue here that seemed to work really good on that plastic, so hopefully it'll work on this down here. You know, this is an awkward way to do this in one way. In another way, this is the best way I can think of to do it, because it'll ensure that I get the thing glued in the right place. And I'm just going to take my finger, reach in there, spread the glue around. It looks like it's covering it really well. So then we just set her down on there. And the only other thing I'm going to try to do is just to put a little clamp pressure on it, but it's just going to be very mild. I'm not going to squeeze this much. Well, that's not working real good. I wish I had a lighter weight clamp that would clamp that without giving me a lot of trouble. I need something lightweight that would hold that. Actually, probably the best thing in this case is just to set something on there, and that's what I think I'm going to do. Find just enough weight to hold it down. It's not quite enough weight by itself. Add the drill bits here. I don't need a ton of weight, but I just need enough to hold it in place. I think that'll do it right there. That'll probably do it. I think I'll just leave that sit like that overnight. and we'll come back and see what it looks like. Just about ready to install the tuners on this. I believe, I can't remember the exact name of these, but those are the vintage type tuners that StewMac sells, I believe. They line up pretty good. I had to fill a ton of holes where the old tuning keys had been put on over the years, and I mean they were like big slots in every location. So anyway, everything's filled, so we should be able to drive these in. And of course the glue is sticking because there's so much glue in these filled places that it's sticking to the drill bit. That just makes it much easier too. That's probably the fourth or fifth set of tuning keys this thing's had on it, just based on all the holes that were there. I will point out that overnight this has shrunk a little bit again, right around where I put those. I don't know if that's showing up on video or not, but you might be able to see the little indentation from the wires again. That's kind of strange because they're fairly deep from this side. They're not right against the side, but I guess that glue just keeps melting over time, and it's, oh well, maybe at the end I'll try sanding it out one more time and buffing it, but right now I'm going to leave it like it is because who knows if it's going to do that again. I think before I get the tailpiece on there, I want to look at this bridge. I know the customer wasn't real happy with this bridge. These giant buttons are what's really bad. The bridge itself isn't too terribly bad if it wasn't for these goofy sized, wheels. Now that makes it easy to adjust, don't get me wrong, but they're just so big that they look out of place for this vintage of an instrument. What we could do is dye this black. Obviously this is not the original. I mean, that's real obvious. But we could dye the rest of the wood black if we had smaller wheels. I'm going to look and see if I've got any wheels that would fit this that are smaller, that would work. And if not, I'm halfway tempted to try to make some. Just because I just don't like the looks of these. Well folks, I have found some posts and wheels that are real nice, and they're just a lot smaller than these great big wheels, and I just think they'll look so much better. Now this bridge, before people get on my butt here and say, hey, you're putting it on the wrong side, the posts typically go in the base. I know that. I've been doing this for 35 years. But in this case, that's not true. The holes go clear through on this base. And the posts just slide up and down in here. And so they're anchored in the top on this one. And they definitely were anchored with these here. They were anchored in the top also. So I'm going to epoxy these into here. This piece sat overnight with the epoxy on it, and the studs have been glued in there. I went ahead and put those two pieces together overnight just so that I know they would dry straight where they would go on together. I've already dyed this black as of yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and dye this piece black now. I just think it looks more authentic black. Most of these were black. As I've already said, this is definitely not the original, so I'm just trying to make it look a little more authentic. And it doesn't take long for this alcohol-based dye to cure, so we'll let that sit for a little while. And we'll go on to working on the tail pin here. I've already put the tailpiece back on. The hole for this pin is just a hair large. I mean, it goes in there and it doesn't actually wiggle. It could be okay, but if somebody used it as a strap button, it could pull out and drop the guitar down. So I'm trying to decide how to do this, if I should just get a different button entirely, and I kind of think that might be the best thing, because this one's just a little too loose. I mean, A lot of people would shim them with paper and different things, but I like to, if I'm going to do something, I like to make it permanent. So let's see what we can do to improve this. Try to find one that fits it really close. This one actually fits it a little bit closer, yet it doesn't go in either. So we'll use this one since it doesn't go all the way in. And even though this one's a much fancier end pin with the inlay there, it's got mother of pearl and like a brass ring around it. So this is a much nicer one, but we'll just trade them out. That's going, it's got about an 1/8 inch to boot. What I do is I spin it around like so, and that generally shows you what's rubbing. And if you really watch close, you can see a shiny spot where it's rubbing. I'm going to get rid of that rub right there, or try to. Actually, the whole thing's a little shiny, so I'm going to go ahead and just lightly clean the whole thing. It might not need much more than that. By just spinning it and cleaning it lightly with the, now it's all dull, and I can put it in the hole, spin it again as I try to press in, and you got to be careful because it can lock up in there really fast and really quick, and I think it did. If I can get it. Well, at least it's going to be tight. I can't get it out. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's what happens, is it? Okay, there's a real high ring right around here, almost nothing anywhere else. So I'm just going to work on that ring, going from there to here. Pretty good. We'll go back in again. It's getting a little closer each time. Try not to push in as I'm doing it. I'm just trying to get locked up on me again. It's getting very close. It's cut down a 1/3 of the distance. It's still got 2/3 of what it had to go. Okay. There we go. Right up to the, yep, it's in there really tight. I can tell you for sure, you'd be very hard pressed to get that out of there. Now, how will you ever get it out of there? You take these screws out and you put little wooden wedges under there, just slowly, just, you know, tapping them in, very thin wedges, and it'll eventually pop it right out of there. But it isn't coming out easy, I can tell you that for sure. So I don't have to worry about the strap pulling it off now. Yeah, I mean, I could pick up the whole guitar by that, I'm positive. The next thing, before we can, well, we're going to have to make a nut up here at the other end before long. But not too worried about that yet. I'm still working down at this end. Problem that I see right off is that these feet don't exactly fit the top of the guitar very well. The top of the guitar is pretty flat for an arch top guitar. And the feet are still kind of archy like that. But the top of this guitar is pretty flat. So, you know, I think it's not a good thing, I don't think, to string it up like this, because these ends are poking into the top and they're going to make dents. And they've already made a little bit of a dent over here. So I'm going to do some sanding and try to level that off just a little bit. Here's a piece of 220 that we'll stick in here. You can see a little bit where it's rubbing right off when you see the dusty parts there where it's rubbing. It's rubbing on the tips and a little bit there in the middle. It's getting pretty good. It's starting to get on most of the area. Getting a lot better. Still though, with, you know, when you clean off the dust, you can still see where it's really not rubbing in this area here, not rubbing there. So it's still just touching in certain places. So I'm marking that as the treble, so I know it goes on the downside here for me. And as I sand it, I'm also slightly trying to tilt it a little bit backwards because these always lean forward. So if anything, I'm putting a little bit more pressure on the back side of the foot. I'm getting pretty close now. Still got a little bit here. Not very much though. It's quite a bit right there though yet. Yeah, I think we're going to call that good. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's way better than it was. Probably should be able to see the difference now. Oh yeah, a lot better. A lot better than it was. Now we're going to put these lifters on here. I think these are much improved over the really giant ones that we had. You know, I don't think they're perfect, but far better than those things that are bigger than a quarter. It just looks more authentic now. It still doesn't look, you know, if you know what a real original bridge looks like, it still doesn't look that way, but it's a lot closer. Okay, so we'll set that aside, and now we'll turn our attention to the nut. First thing we're going to do is try to just figure out how wide of a nut we really want here. And I think we're going to go for 275 thousandths, which is 6.99 millimeters. You basically say 7 millimeters wide, thick this way. So we're going by 0.275 width, and that's the way I think of width. This would, I call this the length for the, just because it's the longest part. 1.875, 1.875. That's the thousandths. The millimeters, that's 47.63 millimeters. And now the trickiest one of all is the height, because you just don't know. And I just use experience on that. I think we're going to go 320 thousandths high, which is roughly 8.15 millimeters. Now we have our dimensions. We're going to cut us out a square block or a block of deer antler for this section here. I made this nut off camera, and one of the key things about fitting up a nut is to make sure that this joint, you know, is good and square, or whatever. It's sometimes they're not square, sometimes, but you got to make sure the joint's clean and flat and straight and all that kind of thing. So I just did that with my chisel just now to make sure that this fits in there really good. And I look at it from 2 or 3 different angles to try to make sure it's going to be good and tight. Looks pretty good. What I like to do is hold it in place, turn it upside down like this, and then you can see the little nibs sticking out on each end. And then I take a very sharp pencil and I draw the little marks. You can see the marks on those 2 sides. And what I do then is I just take it to the sander and knock those off. Or sometimes I may saw it with a bandsaw first, and as soon as that mark disappears, you're right at the place you want to be. And you got to know when to stop, because any further than that, you're making it too small. The customer was able to find some cool looking old pins. They look like the old celluloid type stuff, which is similar to this. Not exactly the same, but pretty similar. It's going to look good on here. They're a little bit small, if anything. That part's not so good. But, you know, once you get the string in there, I don't think they'll be too terribly small. I think they'll work fine then. Yeah, then they kind of, at least with the big string there, they do. Now the problem is these are all going to be way too long. I think what I'm going to do is use this string and the ball there as kind of an example and cut them off just a little bit below that. I'm trying to make a mark on this. Hopefully it'll make a mark. We're going to saw all these off at that mark. Otherwise they will be too long and stick down and hit the top, which you can see has happened in the past, and we don't want that. and I think I'll just take them to a sander and just kind of bevel off the ends. Not going to film that. Well, now that I've got the first string sitting on here, it's not really tight much. Just kind of looking at it, I think we're going to be in trouble down here. This looks like this is going to be really low. It might pull up, but at the moment, it don't look like it. It looks like it's going to rub on the bottom down there. And I've got the pin about the same height as the ball on the end of the string. So I don't like that, but I don't see what I can do about it really. Right, at least not right now. Guess I'll go ahead and get the other E string on it and see if that makes it look any better. And I'm really kind of doing everything all at once here. I'm trying to line it up about where I think the string should go, kind of by eye. Not worried about action yet, just trying to get it mechanically together. See if that looks any better. Yeah, that brings it up off the top. I'm glad to see that. We're high here though, which is not a good thing because that means we're going to have to lower this down probably, but hopefully not too much. Try to tighten these up just a little bit. That's looking better. Hopefully you can see there's a little bit of room under there. Yeah, that new camera, I still haven't had time to work on the focus thing yet. Had a couple of suggestions on that, but I haven't had time to investigate it. I need to be 3 people, and 3 people wouldn't even be nearly enough, really. I'm not going to show the rest of this part. I'll just show it when we get her done. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the strings on here, space them out and everything, and string it up, and then we'll bring you back when we start tuning it up and playing it. Thought we ought to let you hear it after we got her all done. I think it turned out real nice. It looks good. It looks fairly authentic. You know, it's still been abused a lot. There's still a lot of cracks in the back, but at least the back now looks sort of like one piece, you know, or one thing. The peg head looks a whole lot better. The peg head was just horrible on this thing. And it doesn't look like it's been freshly restored or anything, but it just looks like it's been taken care of now. And we've got that, you know, all the binding around the fretboard now, and it feels good. Can't even tell it's there. Fixed up that old bridge and the tailpieces here, and, you know, just did a lot of work. This custom pickguard that we made for it, and cleaned up the fretboard. Overall, it just looks good. New tuning keys. There's just no end to how much we did on this guitar. This is, according to the customer, 1918. I was trying to find a song that would be appropriate for 1918, but I can't really come up with one that I could play. I found a bunch of them. Most of them, of course, as you might expect, were related to World War I. And really, I didn't know any of them, and none of them really seemed like they fit my style to play. So I just gave up on that idea. But an old song that was written about that time, actually written a little bit earlier, was Life is like a mountain railroad with an engineer that's brave. We must make the run successful from the cradle to the grave. Anyway, they give you an idea of what the guitar sounds like. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.